Slap! The sharp crack echoed through the cabin, silencing every whisper, every rustle of paper, every ding of a phone shutting down. A black mother, clutching her crying baby tightly to her chest, staggered back in shock, her cheek blazing red where the flight attendant's hand had just landed. Passengers gasped, some rising from their seats, others fumbling with phones to record what they had just witnessed. The infant screamed louder, the mother's trembling hands trying to soothe him while her own eyes glistened with tears of rage and humiliation. The flight attendant stood there, chest heaving, her lips curling into a sneer as if she had just put someone back in their place. She didn't notice the tall, commanding figure just a few rows back, a man whose face had gone from calm to thunderous in a heartbeat, because the woman she had just slapped wasn't just any passenger. She was his wife, and he wasn't just any husband. He was the CEO and owner of the very airline she worked for. The silence that followed was so heavy, it felt like the plane itself was holding its breath. The flight had barely begun boarding when she stepped into the first-class cabin. Her baby nestled against her chest in a soft blanket. She looked tired but composed, moving with that quiet strength that mothers carry even when the world feels too heavy. Other passengers glanced up, some with polite smiles, others with the thin, dismissive looks that whispered, "She doesn't belong here." The baby fussed a little as she adjusted her seatbelt, humming softly to soothe him. Her hands were careful, practiced, her every move centered around keeping the little one comfortable. For a moment, the cabin was filled with that gentle, maternal aura, the kind that softens even the hardest hearts, but not everyone's. The flight attendant, a woman with sharp eyes and a tighter smile, watched from the aisle with something colder than disapproval. She hovered, offering champagne to others, but when her gaze landed on the black mom, her jaw clenched. "First class isn't for people like you," her eyes seemed to say. At first it was subtle, a cup of water brought without ice though the mother had asked for it, a dismissive shrug when she requested a blanket for her baby. She tried to ignore it, rocking her child gently, whispering lullabies while the other passengers scrolled through their phones, unaware or unwilling to notice the quiet tension simmering between them. Then, turbulence struck. The baby cried louder, startled by the sudden bumps, and the young mother pressed him closer, murmuring, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here." Her voice was low, soothing, but exhaustion made her words tremble. The attendant appeared again, her patience already razor-thin. "You need to keep that baby quiet," she snapped, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. The mother blinked, startled, then replied softly, "I'm doing my best." "He's just scared." Her calmness seemed to infuriate the attendant more. She leaned in closer, hissing, "If you can't control him, maybe first class isn't where you belong." Gasps came from a couple of passengers seated nearby, but no one spoke up. The mother's eyes glistened, her lips parted as if to protest, but before she could, her baby wailed again, louder this time. That sound, innocent yet piercing, seemed to shatter the attendant's restraint. Her hand lashed out before anyone could stop her. Slap. The sound was sharp, violent, unnatural in the refined quiet of first class. The baby shrieked in terror. His mother staggered back in her seat, clutching him tighter, her cheek flushed from the blow. In that frozen moment, while the cabin drowned in stunned silence, a tall man slowly rose from his seat further down the row. His eyes locked onto the scene, his fists tightening, his jaw set in stone. No one else recognized him, yet, but she was his wife, and this flight attendant had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The echo of the slap hadn't even faded, when whispers rippled through the cabin like wildfire. Phones shot up, cameras recording, hands flying to mouths in disbelief. Some passengers gasped audibly, others stared wide-eyed, as if their brains couldn't process what they'd just seen. The young black mother didn't retaliate. She couldn't, not while holding her baby, whose screams now filled the cabin with raw terror. Her hands trembled as she clutched him tighter, rocking him instinctively, trying to shield him from the hatred that had just struck her down in plain view of everyone. Tears welled in her eyes but refused to fall. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Shh. It's okay, baby. Mommy's here." The flight attendant stood frozen for a second, her own chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. She hadn't expected to lose control like that. But worse, she hadn't expected so many eyes to be on her. She quickly masked her face with a veneer of cold authority, straightening her uniform, as though her act could be excused under some twisted sense of order. "Control your child," she snapped, her voice sharp as glass. "Or maybe this seat isn't right for you." The mother's lips trembled, and she opened her mouth to respond, but before a single word escaped, "Enough." The voice came low, steady, but carried through the cabin like a thunderclap. Every head turned. A tall man, broad-shouldered and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, was standing just a few rows back. His expression was carved from stone, his dark eyes burning with a fury that made even the boldest passengers shrink. He stepped into the aisle, moving with a commanding calm, every motion deliberate, unstoppable. The flight attendant blinked, her face paling. "Sir, please sit down," she stammered, attempting to regain her authority. "This doesn't concern you." But the way his gaze bore into her said otherwise. It did concern him, more than she could ever imagine. He stopped beside the trembling mother, gently resting a hand on her shoulder. His touch was protective, steady, radiating strength she so desperately needed in that moment. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She lifted her tearful eyes, nodded faintly, whispering, "I'm fine. Just take him." She extended the baby toward him instinctively, as though handing him to the one person she trusted most in the world. The cabin fell even quieter. Confused murmurs spread. Some passengers began piecing the puzzle together. This wasn't a stranger stepping in. This was her husband. The man cradled the baby with surprising tenderness, his massive hands gentle, his expression softening as he whispered soothingly to the child. The crying lessened, replaced with hiccups and little whimpers. Then his gaze snapped back to the attendant, sharp, merciless. "You laid a hand on my wife," he said, his voice deceptively calm, each word carrying weight like iron chains. The attendant faltered, her lips parting, then snapping shut. Her bravado cracked, but pride pushed her to respond. She wasn't keeping the baby under control. Other passengers were disturbed. I had to what? His voice cut like a blade, silencing her excuse mid-sentence. Had to strike a mother holding her child? Had to humiliate her in front of strangers? Had to treat her as less than human? The passengers around murmured louder now, their discomfort turning into outrage. A woman in the back muttered, "Unbelievable!" Another man whispered to his seatmate, "She really slapped her." The truth was undeniable. Too many had seen it. Too many phones had captured it. The attendant's jaw tightened. She tried to muster confidence. "Sir, please understand. I was only enforcing order." "Order?" His laugh was low, bitter, dangerous. "You call this order? Striking a mother? While she carried my child." The last words hung in the air like a bombshell. Gasps erupted from every direction. Passengers exchanged shocked glances, phones tilted higher to capture every word, every gesture. Whispers spread like a wildfire on dry grass. His child. His wife. The attendant's face drained of color. She stumbled back half a step. Your child?" His gaze locked onto hers, unflinching. "Yes, and she is my wife." The weight of his words crashed into the cabin. It was more than just personal. It was powerful, unshakable truth. And while the passengers reeled from the revelation, the attendant's world collapsed around her. Because behind that calm, controlled fury was a man whose influence stretched far beyond this plane. But she didn't know it yet. He shifted the baby slightly in his arms, his hand never leaving the child's back as if shielding him from the ugliness of the moment. Then he turned back to the mother, his voice gentler. "You don't need to cry anymore. I've got this." Her lips parted, trembling. She whispered, "Thank you," her tears finally spilling. Passengers clapped softly, some in solidarity, others in outrage at what had just been revealed. The atmosphere was no longer quiet discomfort. It was charged, alive, like the cabin itself demanded justice. And in the center of it all stood the man who could deliver. It because he wasn't just a protective husband. He wasn't just a father. He was the CEO and owner of the entire airline. And the flight attendant had no idea her career and her future were seconds away from crumbling. The deep silence in the cabin was suffocating. Every passenger sat frozen, torn between disbelief and anticipation. The attendant stood stiffly, her chest rising and falling rapidly, as if her uniform itself was suffocating her. But her eyes, wide and darting, betrayed the panic she was trying so hard to mask. The man holding the baby moved one slow step forward, his towering frame swallowing the aisle space. His voice was measured, each syllable cold enough to chill the air. "You work for this airline, correct?" The attendant swallowed, nodding quickly. "Yes, sir, and I only did what I thought was..." Wrong answer. His interruption cut through her like a whip. "You didn't think. You acted. And in acting, you crossed a line that can never be uncrossed." The woman's lips quivered. For the first time, she glanced nervously around the cabin, at the cameras still recording, at the rows of eyes judging her, condemning her. He continued, shifting the baby gently in his arms, his voice lowering but somehow carrying to every corner of the plane. "This is not just about my wife. This is not just about my son. This is about the respect owed to every passenger who steps foot on this airline. You represent us. And today, you showed the world a monster hiding behind a uniform." A murmur of agreement rolled through the passengers. Some nodded, others clapped softly in support. The mother, cheek still red from the slap, squeezed her husband's free hand with trembling fingers. The attendant tried to stand straighter. "Sir, if I may, this will only escalate the situation. Please, let's handle this quietly. Quietly." His laugh was humorless, sharp as broken glass. "Do you think what you did deserves quiet?" He gestured toward his wife, still cradling her baby protectively. "You humiliated her in front of strangers. You assaulted her while she held a child. And now, when faced with consequences, you dare ask for silence?" The attendant's knees trembled. She looked around desperately as if searching for an ally. But the passengers' faces were resolute. Phones stayed trained on her. Nobody would save her now. The man turned his gaze to the nearest steward, who had been watching in stunned silence. "What's your name?" Daniel, sir." The steward straightened quickly, his voice respectful, almost fearful. "Good. Daniel, take note. As of this moment, she," he pointed at the attendant with an icy precision, "is relieved of her duties. Remove her from this flight," the cabin gasped collectively. The attendant's face went pale. "You can't do that!" "You don't have the authority." That's when he finally revealed it. "Oh, but I do." His voice thundered now, shaking the very air. "Because I am not just a passenger. I am not just a husband defending his wife. I'm the CEO and owner of this airline. And you..." He paused, his glare slicing into her soul. "Are finished." Gasps turned into shocked cries. Some passengers clapped louder, others whispered frantically, but the truth was undeniable. The man who had risen from his seat wasn't just any executive. He was the very top, the airline's heartbeat. And the woman who had just struck his wife had committed career suicide. The attendant stumbled backward, her composure unraveling. Please, sir, I didn't know. I was under stress." The baby wouldn't stop crying. "I made a mistake. A mistake." His voice roared, his baby now calm against his shoulder, soothed by the steady heartbeat of a father who refused to be shaken. "A mistake is spilling a drink. Forgetting a meal. Mixing up a seat assignment. But what you did was not a mistake. It was cruelty. It was arrogance. It was hatred. And hatred has no place on my planes." Tears filled the attendant's eyes as she shook her head frantically. "Please, I need this job. I didn't mean..." "Look around you," he cut her off. "Every phone recording you. Every witness watching. This is not about what you meant. This is about what you did, and there is no undoing it." The silence after his words was deafening. The weight of finality pressed down on the attendant until she could hardly breathe. Her hands shook, her lips trembled, and for the first time in years, she had no control over the passengers, over the flight, over her future. The mother finally spoke, her voice soft but firm, cutting like truth itself. "You hurt me. You scared my baby. And you made me feel like I didn't belong here, but I do. And no one, especially you, will take that from me again." Her words struck harder than any blow, and the cabin erupted in applause, fierce, thunderous applause that drowned out the attendant's pitiful pleas. Passengers rose to their feet, clapping, some shouting, "Justice!" others simply nodding with tears in their eyes. The man gestured to Daniel, who stepped forward with newfound resolve. "Escort her off this plane," the CEO ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. The attendant's legs buckled. She tried to protest again, but the sound of clapping, the cameras capturing every angle, the CEO's unyielding glare, it was all too much. She covered her face and hurried down the aisle, tears streaking her makeup as she vanished toward the exit. When she was gone, the CEO turned back to his wife. His voice softened immediately, like a storm breaking into sunlight. "Are you all right now?" She nodded faintly, tears sliding down her cheeks. But this time, they weren't from pain. They were from relief. She whispered, "You didn't just defend me. You defended us all." The baby stirred, cooing softly against his father's chest, blissfully unaware of the war that had just been fought for his dignity. The CEO kissed his wife's forehead, his voice warm but resolute. "Never again will anyone make you feel small. Not while I'm here." The cabin erupted in applause once more, louder, prouder, echoing like a promise written in the air. And with that, the balance of power shifted forever. The plane was quieter now, though the air still buzzed with the echoes of what had just unfolded. Passengers whispered to each other, replaying the moment again and again, their eyes still wide with disbelief. Some wiped away tears, others scrolled through their phones, already knowing that the video of this incident would soon spread across the world. But in the midst of all that noise, the CEO's focus was only on his wife. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, his eyes soft with love. "You were so strong," he whispered. Her lips trembled into a small smile. "I wasn't strong," she replied. "I was terrified, but you gave me back my voice when I thought I had none." He shook his head. "No, you've always had your voice. The world just needed to hear it, and now they will." The baby shifted, letting out a tiny yawn, as if the innocence of that gesture was enough to wash away the ugliness that had scarred the flight. The mother leaned down and kissed her child's head, a silent vow that he would never grow up believing he or his family were less than anyone else. Across the cabin, passengers began to approach. A middle-aged woman in the third row placed a hand on the mother's shoulder, her eyes wet. "You're an inspiration," she said softly. "What you endured, no one should have to go through that. But the way you held yourself, it gave us all courage." Another passenger, a young man with headphones around his neck, lifted his phone. "The whole world's gonna see this. People will know the truth, and they'll know what kind of leader runs this airline." He nodded respectfully at the CEO. The man inclined his head, though his expression stayed humble. "This isn't about leadership," he said. "It's about humanity. Titles don't matter when it comes to right and wrong. What matters is standing up when silence becomes complicity." The passengers clapped softly again, not in the chaotic cheer of before, but in a gentler, almost reverent way. It wasn't just applause, it was gratitude. As the flight continued, calm slowly returned. Drinks were served, children laughed, conversations resumed, but an unspoken bond now connected everyone on that plane. They weren't just strangers anymore. They had shared something unforgettable. The mother leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, finally allowing her body to relax. Her eyes fluttered shut, and for the first time since boarding, she felt safe. Not because the flight was smooth, not because the skies were clear, but because she knew she was not alone. Her husband tightened his arm around her, kissing the top of her head, his gaze steady as he looked down the aisle. There would be press, there would be statements, there would be consequences for the woman who had crossed the line. But in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the family he had sworn to protect. The baby's tiny hand curled around his finger, soft and trusting. And in that touch, the CEO found his resolution. Not in power, not in revenge, but in the simple, unshakable truth that love, when defended, is the greatest authority of all. The engines hummed steadily, carrying them forward through the sky. But for the family at the heart of it all, the real journey had just begun.